Isaiah 10. Woe to those who inscribe inscriptions of falsehood and who order that fraudulent documents be written, to deprive the destitute of justice and to rob the justice of the poor of my people, so that widows will be their spoil and they plunder orphans. What will you do about the day of retribution, about catastrophe that comes from far away? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your glory? You will not survive unless you kneel in the prisoner's place or cast yourselves down in the place of the slain. Yet despite all this, his anger has not subsided, and his hand is still outstretched. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger. My wrath is a staff in their hand. Against a hypocritical people shall I send them, and against a people that angers me shall I charge them, to take spoils, and to plunder booty, and to make them trampled like the mire of the streets. But he does not imagine this, and his heart does not think this way. For his heart is set to destroy, and to cut off nations, without leaving even a bit. For he says, Are not all my officers like kings? Is not Calno like Karshemish? Is not Hamath like Arpad? Is not Samaria like Damascus? Just as my hand has overpowered the kingdoms of the false god, and their graven images are from Jerusalem and Samaria, surely, just as I have done to Samaria and its false gods, so shall I do to Jerusalem and its idols. But it will be that after the Lord completes all his work at Mount Zion and Jerusalem, I will deal with the fruits of the Assyrian king's conceit, and with the glory of his arrogant eyes. For he said, With the strength of my hand have I accomplished, and with my wisdom, for I have understanding, and I have removed the boundaries of peoples. I have plundered their treasuries. I have brought down dwellers in strongholds. My hand has found the wealth of the peoples like a nest, as one gathers abandoned eggs. So have I gathered the whole world, and no one shook a wing or opened a mouth and chirped in protest. Can a hatchet glory over the one who chops with it? Can a saw be greater than the one who wields it? It is as if a rod could shake those who lift it, as if a stick could lift one who is not wood. Therefore, the Lord Hashem, master of legions, will send a leanness among his fattened ones. And instead of his glory, a burning will burn like the blaze of fire. And the light of Israel will be like fire, and his Holy One will be like a flame. It will burn and consume his thorns and weeds in a single day. And its glorious forest and its fertile fields it will annihilate from soul to flesh. And they will be like a termite's chewings. The tree remnant of his forest will be few. A child will record them. It will be on that day that the remnant of Israel and the survivors of the house of Jacob will no longer rely on its attacker, but it will rely on Hashem, the Holy One of Israel. In truth, the remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For even if your people Israel will be like the sand of the sea, only a remnant of it will return. For an intense destruction will surge forth with justification. For an intense devastation does the Lord Hashem Elohim, master of legions, carry out in the midst of all the land. Therefore, thus said the Lord Hashem Elohim, master of legions, do not be afraid of Assyria, O my people who dwell in Zion, though he will strike you with the staff and raise his rod over you in the manner of Egypt. For in a very short while my fury and my anger will destroy them for their sacrilege. Hashem, master of legions, will arouse a rod upon him like the defeat of Midian at the rock of Oreb, and his staff as at the sea of reeds, and carry him away in the manner of Egypt. It will be on that day that he will lift Assyria's affliction from your shoulders, and his yoke from upon your neck. And the yoke will be broken because of the oil. It has come to Ayath and passed through Migron. He deposits his belongings in Mishmas. They passed by the river crossing. They lodged at Geba. Ramah trembled. Gibeath Shaul fled. Let out your voice, Beth-Galim. Hear, O Laish. Anathoth is wretched. Madmenah has moved away. The inhabitants of Gebim have mustered themselves. Yet today he will stand in Nob. He will wave his hand contemptuously at the mountain of the daughter of Zion, at the hill of Jerusalem. Behold, the Lord Hashem, master of legions, will chop off branches with an axe. Those of lofty stature will be severed, and the haughty ones brought low. Forest thickets will be hewn by iron, and the Lebanon will fall by a mighty one. Isaiah 11. A staff will grow from the stump of Jesse, and a shoot will sprout from his roots. The spirit of Hashem will rest upon him, a spirit of wisdom and understanding, a spirit of counsel and strength, a spirit of knowledge and fear of Hashem. He will be imbued with the spirit of fear of Hashem and will not need to judge by what his eyes see, nor decide by what his ears hear. He will judge the destitute with righteousness and rebuke with fairness the humble of the earth. He will strike the wicked of the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be the girdle around his loins, and faith will be the girdle around his waist. The wolf will live with the sheep, and the leopard will lie down with the kid, and a calf, a lion whelp, and a fatling will walk together, and a young child will lead them. A cow and bear will graze, and their young will lie down together. And a lion, like cattle, will eat hay. A suckling will play by a viper's hole, and a newly weaned child will stretch his hand toward an adder's lair. They will neither injure nor destroy in all of my sacred mountain. For the earth will be as filled with the knowledge of Hashem as water covering the seabed. It shall be on that day that the descendant of Jesse, who stands as a banner for the peoples, nations will seek him, and his resting place will be glorious. It shall be on that day that the Lord will once again show his hand to acquire the remnant of his people, who will have remained from Assyria and from Egypt, and from Pathros, and from Cush, and from Elam, and from Shinar, and from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. He will raise a banner for the nations and assemble the castaways of Israel. And he will gather in the dispersed ones of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall stop, and the oppressors of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. They will fly in unison against the Philistines in the west, and together they will plunder the people of the east. Their hand will extend over Edom and Moab, and their discipline over the children of Ammon. Hashem will dry up the gulf of the sea of Egypt, and he will wave his hand over the Euphrates River with the power of his breath. He will break it into 7 streams and lead the people across in dry shoes. There will be a road for the remnant of his people that will remain from Assyria, as there was for Israel on the day it went up from the land of Egypt. Isaiah 12. You will say on that day, I thank you, Hashem, for you were angry with me, and now your wrath has subsided, and you have comforted me. Behold, God is my salvation. I shall trust and fear not. For God is my might and my praise, Hashem, and he was a salvation for me. You can draw water with joy from the springs of salvation. And you will say on that day, give thanks to Hashem, declare his name, make his acts known among the peoples, declare that his name is exalted. Make music for Hashem, for he has acted with grandeur. Make this known throughout the world. Exult and sing for joy. O inhabitant of Zion, for the Holy One of Israel is great in your midst. Isaiah 13. a prophecy concerning Babylonia, which Isaiah son of Amos envisioned. Upon the high mountain, hoist a banner, raise a voice to them, wave a hand, and let them come to the doors of the nobles. I have commanded my appointed ones. I have also summoned my warriors to execute my wrath, to be exuberant over my grandeur. The sound of commotion is in the mountains, like that of an enormous people, the crescendo of the kingdoms of gathering nations. Hashem, master of legions, is assigning officers for the legion of war. They come from a faraway land, from the end of the heavens, Hashem and his weapons of anger, to devastate the entire land. Wail, for the day of Hashem is near. It will come as a sudden attack from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will grow weary and every human heart will melt. They will be terrorized. Aches and pains will seize them. They will be in travail like a woman in childbirth. Each man will be astonished at his friend. Their faces are faces of flame. Behold, the day of Hashem is coming, a day of cruelty, rage, and burning anger to make the land desolate, and he will annihilate its sinners from it. For the stars of the heavens and their constellations will not radiate their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shine forth its light. I will visit evil upon the earth and upon the wicked their iniquity. And I will end the pride of the wanton and bring low the haughtiness of the mighty. I will make man more valuable than rare gold, and people more than the precious gold of Ophir. Therefore, I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will rumble from its place at the fury of Hashem, master of legions, on the day of his burning wrath. They will be like an outcast deer, and like sheep with no one to gather in. Each person will turn to his people, and each person will flee to his land. Anyone found will be pierced, and anyone who is gathered in will fall by the sword. Their babies will be sundered before their eyes. Their houses will be pillaged, and their wives ravished. Behold, I shall arouse Media against them, who will not value silver and will not desire gold. Their bows will sunder young men. They will show no mercy for the fruit of the womb, and their eyes will not have pity on children. And Babylonia, the choicest of kingdoms, the splendor of the glory of the Chaldeans, will be like God's overturning of Sodom and Gomorrah. It will not be inhabited forever, and it will not be settled from generation to generation. No Arab will pitch tent there, and shepherds will not make their flocks lie there. Martens will lie there, and their houses will be full of ferrets. Owls will live there, and demons will dance there. Cats will howl in their mansions, and jackals in their palaces of delight. Her time is soon to come. Her days will not long endure. Isaiah 14. For Hashem will show mercy to Jacob. He will choose Israel again and grant them rest upon their land. The proselyte will join them and be attached to the house of Jacob. The nations will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them as slaves and maidservants upon the land of Hashem. They will be captors over their captors, and they will rule over their oppressors. It shall be on that day when Hashem grants you relief from your distress and your anxiety, and from the hard labor with which you were worked, you will recite this parable about the king of Babylonia. How has the oppressor come to an end, the arrogance been ended? Hashem has broken the staff of the wicked, the rod of rulers who would strike peoples with fury, with unrelenting blows, who would oppress nations with wrath. The nations were pursued by them without respite. The entire land is quiet and tranquil. They broke out in glad song. Even the cypresses rejoice over you, O cedars of Lebanon, saying, from the time that you were laid low, the woodcutter would not come up against us. The nether world from below trembles for you to greet your arrival. It has awakened the giants for you, all the leaders of the world. It has aroused all the kings of the land out of their thrones. They will all proclaim and say to you, You also have been stricken as we were. You are compared to us. Brought down to the netherworld were your pride and the tumult of your stringed instruments. Maggots are spread out under you, and worms are your covers. How have you fallen from the heavens, O glowing morning star? You have been cut down to the ground, O conqueror of nations. You had said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. Higher than the stars of God I shall raise my throne. I will sit at the mountain of meeting on the northern side. I will ascend over the tops of the clouds. I will liken myself to the Most High. But to the nether world have you been lowered, to the bottom of the pit. Those who see you will take note. They will contemplate you carefully. Is this the man who made the land tremble? Who made kingdoms quake? Who made the world like a wilderness and tore down its cities? Who never released his captives to go home? All the kings of the nations, all of them, lie in honor, each in his place. But you have been flung from your grave like a detested tree shoot, like the garment of corpses pierced by the sword, which are lowered into the stones of the pit, like a trampled carcass. You will not join them in burial, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Your evil offspring will not be called by your name for long. Prepare a slaughter for his sons for the father's iniquities. Let them not arise and inherit the land, lest the world become full of enemies. I will rise up against them, the word of Hashem, master of legions, and I will cut off for Babylonia name and remnant, child and grandchild, the word of Hashem. And I will make it an inheritance for the hedgehogs and marshes of water. And I will sweep it clean with the broom of destruction, the word of Hashem, master of legions. Hashem, master of legions, has sworn, saying, surely, as I have conceived, so shall happen. And as I have devised, so shall be established. To break Assyria in my land, I will trample him on my mountains. His yoke will be removed from upon Israel, and his burden will be removed from upon Israel's shoulder. This is the plan that is devised against all the land, and this is the hand that is outstretched against all the nations. For Hashem, master of legions, has devised, and who can annul? His hand is outstretched. Who can turn it back? In the year of King Ahaz's death, this prophecy came. Do not rejoice, O Philistia, all of you, because the staff that beat you has been broken. For from the root of the snake will emerge a viper, and its progeny will be a flying serpent. The foremost of the poor will then graze, and the destitute will lie down in security. And I will kill your root with famine, and he will slay your remnant. Wail for the gate, cry out for the city. Melt in fear, O Philistia, all of you. For smoke comes from the north, and no one is isolated among his appointed troops. What will the messengers of the nations say? That Hashem has established Zion, and in it the poor of his people will take shelter. Isaiah 15, a prophecy concerning Moab. On the night Ar of Moab was pillaged, it was silenced. On the night that Kir of Moab was pillaged, it was silenced. Its populace went up to the temple, and Dibon went up to the high places to weep. Moab wails for Nebo and for Medeba. On all of its heads there is baldness. Every beard is diminished. In their streets they have donned sackcloth. Upon their rooftops and in their plazas, everyone wails and laments with weeping. Heshbon cried out, and Elialah, their voice is heard until Jahaz. Therefore, the armed soldiers of Moab shout. Its soul shouts for it. My heart cries out for Moab. Her refugees flee until Zoar, the third-born calf. For they will ascend the Luhith ascent with weeping. For on the road of Horonaim they howl with the cry of catastrophe. For the waters of Nimrim will be laid waste. For the grass is withered, the herbage is finished, the greenery is gone. For the wealth they had accrued and their possessions will be carried off to the willow brook. For the outcry envelops the boundary of Moab, and Eglaim is her wailing, until Beer Elim is her wailing. For the waters of Dimon are filled with blood. For I will pour more of it into Dimon. Upon the survivors of Moab there will come a lion, upon the remnant of the land. These prophecies foretell the destruction of Assyria, and they are constructed in a similar fashion as the previous prophecies of destruction. It will be fantastic. Now, there will be a remnant of the children of Israel who will be rescued. They will live gloriously. Once again, someone from the house of David will reign, and this person will do so correctly. However, this person will have a very, very special spiritual connection that will make him able to understand in a way that perhaps others are not going to be able to understand. Isaiah writes with his lips and with his tongue, not with like violence and, missiles. So it sounds to me like he's going to speak harsh words, which we know nobody wants to hear the truth. We really do want to be lied to. It makes us feel better. But the rule of this leader will be for peace, and it will be some sort of a different kind of peace. It extends even to animals. Chapter 12 seems to point to this leader of Israel being the Holy One of Israel, which I think we generally interpret to be God. So that could be cool. Once again, Isaiah tells these people that the entire world will seek out this unique knowledge from God from Mount Zion. Okay, so there is a repetition. There's going to be destruction. Got it. My question is this. When the prophet writes down these prophecies, and then he delivers these prophecies to a king or to a library or to a synagogue or to the priests or to whomever, what happens then? Is there a system where they read these things out like very special urgent messages? Or is there some group of people who review the message and determine whether or not it's valid? Now we know from earlier readings that there are false prophets inside the house of God. Now, is it unreasonable to assume that these prophecies would actually not be shared with the people because they speak of something horrible and they don't want to frighten the community? So, if this is the case, how does the community know which prophet to listen to? The scrappy, rough-looking Isaiah that the very wealthy rich guys don't like? Or the guys that are wearing the uniforms that come from the buildings that, have the titles? Notice how it is the king's responsibility to decipher between the two, but everybody suffers when he makes a mistake. Now think about it for a second. This is exactly what they asked for when they were asking for a king to lead them, and they will follow him and he will do the things and they will say, that is correct. This is what that is. Hosea writes that God relented in anger to give them a king. So clearly it was not God's plan. So we have these prophecies that say there's going to be destruction, and then there's going to be like an awakening. You're going to realize, and then there's going to be a restoration. There's going to be an unbelievable leader. It does bring up a fair number of questions as we read through. However, I suppose that would be the nature of prophecies, and there are still several more to go, but thank you for listening. The NQE is out.